Good morning. It's November 26th, Tuesday morning. I'm sorry, Wednesday morning. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. And I pray that we stay in an attitude of Thanksgiving every day, because that's what the Lord would have, and that's feeds our heart. That's what works best for us, to stay in that place where we're just thankful in all things for what God's doing in our lives. This morning I was in 1Timothy chapters 5 through 6, and I wanted to share on chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, and then verse 17. 6 through 8, and then verse 17. Tie them together. Paul says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Godliness with contentment is great gain. "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." We will be content with that. Then we go down to verse 17. "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." Interesting, you put those two scriptures together, and I want to look at what Paul's saying here. He says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." To have God working in our lives, to be transforming us into the image of Jesus, to have godliness, to be like Him, with contentment is great gain. That we'll be content as God does His work. That we will not strive, but we'll be content as God does His work in us. And that will be enough. That we'll be satisfied with the fact that He's changing us and transforming us into the image of His Son. That He's forgiven us by His death on the cross. And He's made us part of His family and His children. He's given us new life. And in that life He's transforming us. And He brought us from darkness into light. He says, so with that, godliness with contentment is great gain. Notice this great gain. It's not something that just comes natural. Even though God changes us and saves us, many times we still strive. Many times we want to be more mature than we are. We want to have more spiritually, physically, emotionally, materially than we have. And Paul says, be content with what godliness, what God is doing in your life. Be content with that. And that'll be a great gain. You'll grow. To be content and to not want and to not have all kinds of desires that we don't need, and to have passions we don't need, and to have goals that we don't need, except to be transformed into His image. That's what we need. Be content with that. He says, you know why? Because came into this world, we had nothing. When we were born, we had nothing. Except for, hopefully, some people to take care of us, and to love us, and to care for us. But materially, we had nothing. Everything we had was given to us. And then as we grew and we established ourselves, and we began to have needs, we thought. And we do have needs, and God takes care of that. He says we didn't bring anything to this world. We can't take anything out of it when we die. Nothing here is going to go with us. Nothing that we possess will go with us. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content. We need to clothe ourselves, and God's given us bodies where we need to eat. And of course, the day and age we live in, we also need shelter. In that day, they needed shelter too. But Paul says, so be content with that, and we will be content. if we're in Jesus, if we're allowing him to transform our lives, we will be content with that. But then it says, like down in verse 17, here it's talking to the rich. And my concern this morning isn't so much the rich. If you happen to be rich, God will speak to your heart. I'm not rich, but I'm receiving from my own heart. I want to share what God has placed into my heart this morning. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth. And even if we're not rich, none of us, we live in America. It's very hard for us not to get on that level. That in America we're taught to gain. In America we're taught to purchase. In America we're taught to get rich as you can. In America, the American dream is to have, to be somebody. And so Paul here says, if that's already happened to you, don't put your hope in that. Don't put your hope in your wealth. He says, because it's so uncertain, it will come and go. It'll come and it'll disappear. And that's for the little bit of savings that any of us have. Hopefully it stays there. Hopefully God can use it. But it could disappear. Instead, it says, but put their hope in God. That he will take care of us. That he will provide work. That he'll provide our substance. That we might have clothing. That we might have food. And then we might have whatever we need. Put our hope into him. Why can we do that? Who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. So on one hand, Paul says, be content. If you have food and clothing, just be content within godliness. That's a great gain. But he also tells us, but you know what? God provides everything we need for us to enjoy it. And that's much more than food and clothing. Much more. God knows what I need to enjoy my life. God knows what I need to have with me as I walk. God knows what I need to have in my life that I can share with others. God knows what my family needs. God knows what my wife needs. God knows what my children and my grandchildren need. And so he provides all that for us to enjoy it. To enjoy. He gives us more than just our needs. He wants us to enjoy this life. We have hardships in this life, but he provides everything for our enjoyment. He's a good God. This is my prayer. That we'll learn to allow God to put his godliness into us. His Holy Spirit. He will bear the fruit of the Holy Spirit. We'll be transformed into the image of his Son. Each day will be more and more like Jesus, letting Jesus live his life through us. And we'll be content with that. Knowing really all we need is a few things. We need to be clothed. We need food. We need water. We need love. God gives us love. He will give us everything we need. But he'll also give us all those things to enjoy. That we might have a life that is not just content, but enjoyable. We serve a good God, a great God. Thanks for listening to me today.